Hello and welcome to another booktube video from me, MarthaMayBooks. Today I have for you my October wrap-up. Again, this is going to be one that runs throughout the month, so my setting will probably change, it might not though. My outfits will change, my hair will change, it'll all be different. So the first book that I finished in October was Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Riordan. I rated this 3 stars. I didn't love it as much as people love Percy Jackson. It's just not for me. I think what I did like about it is I loved all of the incorporation of the Greek myths. I loved Annabeth, is that what she's called? The girl, I thought she was fun. That was about it. I still gave it 3 stars. Like, I liked the story, I liked the adventure elements. If I was in the right age category for this book series, I probably would have enjoyed it more. I am not. So, you know, I also accept that. I'm not having a go at Percy Jackson. Well, actually, I would like to have a go at Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson seems to forget constantly that he is in a Greek myth retelling story situation. Constantly, because all of the monsters that come after him, he's like, oh yeah, let me go into their house. You're literally in a Greek myth story, so maybe channel your knowledge of the Greek myths and consider whether you're in a trap with a monster. Like, just because you're hungry doesn't mean that you should get yourself kidnapped. And he's like impossibly easy to kidnap as well. Like, oh, Percy, follow me. And he's like, okay, I will. It's not like everyone's trying to murder me. So I didn't like that. And I also didn't like the whole like monologuing villain situation that came towards the end, where it was like, oh, well, you're going to die, so I'll explain the whole plot of the book to you. I was a bit like, okay, crack on. Then I have Bitter Orange by Claire Fuller. So I started this last month. It was on my roll for a short book in Bookopoly-thon. Is that what it's called? And I did not finish it that month, but I have finished it now. This follows Frances, who is a woman in her 40s who has been hired by an American man to survey a house in England that he has bought, and he wants her to survey the statues and the bridges and the follies in the gardens. And so she goes to this house and does that. That's Frances. And at this house, which I think is called Langton's, she meets a guy called Peter, who is there to survey the like antiques in the house and like the inside of the house, whereas Frances is for the outside. And Peter's wife, Sara, who seems a bit mysterious and enchanting. And it follows their summer in this house. So this is described as like Daphne du Maurier and like gothic and things like that. Shirley Jackson, people say. And I would say yes, it sort of felt to me a bit like Woman in Black, where it's someone has been sent to this old house to do a job and they are doing that job while other things are going on. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I like Claire Fuller, so I've read Our Endless Numbered Days by Claire Fuller, and I like Claire Fuller for her kind of like plot twists, but they're not really plot twists, but they kind of are. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like things are revealed within Claire Fuller's books where like if you were thinking really hard and paying loads of attention, you could have worked out, and then they're just kind of confirmed. But because the way that I was reading this was just like, I'll let the story come to me and think about it every now and then, I didn't work it out, so I was really shocked by some of the things that happened in here. But I really liked this. The framework of this novel is that Frances is now dying and she's in care facility, and a vicar comes and visits her and tries to understand what really happened in their last few days at Langton's. The next book that I read in October was 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. So I've seen Simon from Savage Reads rave about this with his mother. While I was watching that video, I downloaded it on audio and I loved this. What I loved about this was that it focused on pretty much all of the women involved in the Trojan War, which I really liked. So I listened to this on audio and I loved it. So 1,000 Ships is framed around a muse, forgotten her name, who is she's the muse of epic war poetry, I know that much, and she is telling the story of the women in the Trojan War to a poet with the hopes that the poet will tell the women's stories and not the men's stories all over again. Great, loved it. We see from the point of view of the Trojan women, we see from the point of view of goddesses, we see from the point of view of nymphs that are involved and married to various horrible men. We also see from a point of view which I loved, which was Penelope, I think is her name, Odysseus's wife. And she is sat at home waiting for Odysseus to return from the war, and she's hearing poets come to the halls and tell the stories of Odysseus as he's on his odyssey trying to come home to her, or not trying to come home to her, as the case may be. And in the first couple of her chapters, she's like, oh, Odysseus, like, you're so clever, you're so wise, that's what I loved about you, not in an annoying way. And then the further you get into it and the later it's been and the longer he's spent with Circe and a nymph, the angrier she gets, and I loved it. And the way that Natalie Haynes read it as well was really good because she put all the things in it, all the emotions. Hello, so I had just wrapped up 1,000 Ships, which you just saw, and now I am here to wrap up the next book that I read in October. Same clothes, different hairstyle. It's the same day. So I have just finished Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman, which wasn't on my TBR for this month, but I read it anyway. This is the second book in the Scythe series. I think it's called The Arc of the Scythe, this series. I think it's a trilogy. I've literally just finished it. I was listening to it on audiobook because I thought my heating was on then, it's so hot. Because I enjoyed the audiobook of it. I didn't love the plot of the first book, but I enjoy the concept. I enjoyed the audiobook. What am I going on about? I liked it. I would give this one 4 stars. I gave Scythe 3 stars, but this felt like an expansion on the world. We got to see some more dark plots. I am ready to start the next book, but I have to get some internet before I can download it to listen to it. But yeah, it was a good time, interesting. That's all I have to say, really, to be honest with you. I haven't really got a lot to say about it because it's the second book, so I can't tell you anything about it. But yeah, 4 stars. For you guys, you're watching a video of mine, so it's not so weird to keep seeing me popping up. But for me, I don't normally film so much in a day, so I feel like, you know, when you have to ring the same person up more than twice in the same day and you feel a bit stalkerish, that's how I feel. I have just completed my Goodreads reading challenge for the year, reading goal, which was 60 books. I think I'm going to put it up because I quite like that end of the year struggle when you're like, oh, I've not reached my goal yet. I quite like that, so I might put the challenge up to 70 because I could definitely read 10 more books before the end of the year. I say that, but I might not. Anyway, I just keep forgetting it's October because it's so early. Stop nattering on, you're not at the start of a video. I have just finished The Confessions of Franny Langton by Sara Collins. I'm giving this 5 stars. I loved this so much. I really enjoy Gothic novels. The classics, good times. The modern ones, good times. But this is so different from any other Gothic novel that I have read because it centres a character who you never hear about in any other Gothic novels, it feels like. So The Confessions of Franny Langton follows Franny Langton, who is accused of murdering her master and mistress, who she is a servant for, in 1826. And she's accused of murdering them, and she's on trial for the murder. And this book is the book that she writes while she's in jail, prison, awaiting the trial and kind of during the trial. We also get some court transcripts, so the questions that are asked of the witnesses and all of the people, which I really enjoyed hearing about, hearing those people's opinions too. We also get some diaries of the master, Mr. Benham, that kind of put his side of the story out there a little bit. This is Franny's point of view, but she claims that she doesn't remember if she committed the murders, which is really interesting because then the whole time she's an unreliable narrator, because if she can't remember committing a murder, like what else has she remembered wrong? But at the same time, when I was reading it, I was just desperate to believe everything she was telling me. So that was really interesting. This is sold as a Gothic novel by the author, and I think it is really interesting to read something from the 1800s that does centre a character who has been sidelined. Franny's a former slave and is given by her previous master as a servant to these people, and she also fancies women. I don't know if it's just women she likes, but there is a female-female relationship in this as well. Oh, the other thing that I found really interesting about this is that in a lot of other Gothic novels, Frankenstein, the monk, Dracula, I feel like those are some pretty standard Gothic novels. A lot of the horror is based around the supernatural and humans or monsters behaving in ways that are supernatural and spooky things happen. Whereas in this, there's no ghosts, there's no monsters. Well, there are monsters. There's no supernatural monsters, I'll say. But the horror comes from things that were actually done, like the atrocities that happened during slavery and afterwards. The other thing is that Franny Langton can read. She's taught to read by her previous mistress in Jamaica. She's taught to read, and throughout this book there's talk of novels and what they mean to people and how they help Franny through her life, and I loved that as a reader. Obviously, I really loved the descriptions, because sometimes when novels and books and writing are spoken about in books, it's so boring because it's like, yeah, I know, I like books too, you don't need to tell me. But this was done so well. Well done, Sarah Collins. That's all I can say. The next book that I finished in October is The Amber Spyglass by Phillip Pullman, the final book in the His Dark Materials series, trilogy. I'm so sad for how this series went. So I read The Northern Lights last year, the end of last year, loved it, 5 stars. I read it alongside watching the BBC adaptation, which I'd really recommend if you can get your grubby little paws on it. Please watch it, it's really good. But watched and read that, loved it. Subtle Knife, less so. I think it was just the introduction of the character of Will when there was no integration of him early, like in the first book. Found that kind of odd and just didn't love. It just felt very repetitive. This one, like, no, it's just not it. Like, I liked the start. I was enjoying kind of like the plots being sewn and all of the situations. But to be honest, like, I'm close to giving this 2 stars. I think I'm gonna give it 3 stars, but I just hated the ending. It could have gone so much better than this. From the first book, it's just all downhill from the first book. I'm looking forward to watching the adaptation, because I will say it's really good. So even though I didn't love Subtle Knife and Amber Spyglass, I am looking forward to, you know, that. But yeah, it was just weird. Just weird. So the next book that I read in October was The Toll by Neal Shusterman. I listened to this on audio, and it was, I think, the longest audiobook that I have listened to in my little adventures into audiobooks recently. I liked it. I gave it 5 stars. So I think Scythe I gave like 3 stars. And the series has been growing on me. I loved in all of this, there were like a ton of conspiracy theories. We hear more from the Thunderhead. That's all I'm going to say, because it's the final book in a trilogy. So I don't really want to spoil anything. Maybe I have in just what I've said, but I really like this series. I probably wouldn't have continued with it if it wasn't for the audiobooks, to be honest. I can't imagine me actually reading this, but the audiobook narrator was really good, and I just really enjoyed listening to it. Then I read The Sin Eater by Megan Campisi. I also listened to this one on audio, and I also loved this one. So I gave this between 4 and 5 stars, just because, and to be honest, I think it was the audiobook that kind of put me off slightly. What's it about? Let's start there. So I first heard about this on Lauren and the Books channel. It's set in like alternate Elizabethan times. So the Queen is like Queen Bethany or something like that, but she, like, her father was basically Henry VIII. Her mother was basically Anne Boleyn. She like grew up in her stepmother and father's household, which is meant to be whatever Catherine was last. So it's basically Elizabethan, but it's not. And I think the author's done it in case there's any like historical inaccuracies, which I think was a clever move, because then people can't tell you that you're wrong. On top of this, there's a massive leaning into sin eating. So in normal history, sin eaters were people that would eat bread by the coffin of a dead person to remove some of their sin, whereas in this universe there's a ritual feast by someone called a sin eater who eats like particular food depending on the sins that the person has committed in their life, and no one can talk to the sin eater's not allowed to talk, they have like a collar and their tongue's branded, and that is kind of the setup of the world. So it made sense to me that it was set in kind of a parallel historical timeline to the actual events of Elizabethan time. But it kind of confused me and kind of put me off slightly as well at the same time. I don't know if I would have preferred it if it was just like, we all accept that the author has taken liberties with the history here, and so we just say Elizabeth, Henry, Anne, Catherine, all of that, rather than like changing the names slightly, like Mary Tudor was Maris and Elizabeth was Bethany, and it was just kind of weird. But I don't know if I would have preferred it the other way. Maybe I would have, just because it would have removed that kind of leap that you have to take with that, where it's like, oh right, that's who that person is. The plot is this young woman called May steals some bread and is made a sin eater. And she has to come to terms with the fact that she is a sin eater. And on top of that, dealing with her new life, she starts to discover some evil doings at the palace and some like political intrigue, court, politics, and all of that. I won't say any more because it's a spoiler, but it's kind of like mystery going on underneath, which I found difficult to keep up with the audiobook. I think that generally for me, audiobooks, it's okay if there's a bit of a mystery, like, oh, who did this thing? But this one was very like twisty and turny, and there was a lot of figuring out, which was great and fun. But because I was listening to it kind of while I was doing other things, I didn't completely follow all of it, but I think I know who did all the things. So the next books that I read in October, why do I keep forgetting what month it is, were the Gods and Warriors series by Michelle Paver. So this is a series that this is a book that I have owned for 8 years, and almost 8 years, and had never read, and have read it now, and I loved it. The first one, I think I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, loved it, had a great time, wonderful. Then I read The Burning Shadow, which is book 2, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read The Falcon's Eye, which is the 3rd book, and I think I gave it 5 stars. I believe I did. Then I read The Crocodile Tomb, the 4th book. I gave it 4 stars. I liked it, but it just took me a bit longer to get into it. And then I read Warrior Bronze, which is the last book, and I gave 5 stars. Don't do that, Martha, it's a library book. The Gods and Warriors series is about a 12-year-old boy called Hylas who is on the run from evil crow warriors after they attacked his camp, killed his dog, and made his sister go missing. And they're trying to kill him because of a prophecy that their magical knife is wielded by an outsider, which Hylas is, then their house will burn, basically. And this is the wonderful series of that story. Then on audio, I read The Foundling by Stacey. Anyone who cares to pay a vague amount of attention to my videos, which fair enough if you don't, I barely do, would know that I had the Familiars on my TBR for October this month. But because I read the whole of the Gods and Warriors series, I kind of put this off, although it looks glorious. And instead I decided to read The Foundling, which is also by Stacey, on audio. So The Foundling is about a woman who has a baby and she puts it in a foundling hospital where the hospital raise them until they're old enough to go into service. And so she has a little girl and she leaves her at the hospital, and then 6 years later she goes back to the hospital to reclaim her, finds out that her baby had been claimed the day after she left her by somebody claiming to be her mother. And not only claiming to be her mother, but claiming to be her, as in like the woman. Her name's Bess, and she's claiming to be her. I loved this. I gave this 5 stars? 4 stars? I think I gave it 4 stars, but it's close to 5. I really liked it. So in this we hear a multitude of perspectives. There's great characters. I was stressed the whole way through this audiobook. I think I listened to it from maybe yesterday or the day before to today, and the whole time I was stressed, which I didn't like, but also it shows that the book was good. Hello, sorry if I look bedraggled. In fact, I'm not that sorry. There's my dog. I'm going to change the angle so you guys can look at him. So the next book that I read in October was His Bloody Project by Graeme, Macrae, Burnet. So this follows a young man, I think he's 17, and it follows the case of a young man who committed, or did he? No, he did, committed 3 brutal murders in a crofting community in the Scottish Highlands. The way that it's set up is we get his personal memoir and writings about the murders, and then we get witness testimony, doctors, you know, the doctors that like open up the corpses and see how they died, and we also get the kind of the tale of the trial, and it's all set up as though it is a true historical event that Graeme Macrae Burnet has gathered the information of. It was super interesting and I gave it 4 stars. So what I liked about it was I liked the authenticity. I did believe initially that it was real, and then I was like, I don't think the Booker Prize has like non-fiction stuff. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed that initially we're kind of made to like Roderick Macrae, and then stuff comes out that changes our opinion. I just found it super interesting, and it was very immersive, very believable. If you enjoy true crime, I think this is a really cool book. I just had such dramas with my camera that I nearly cried, so that's ideal for the end of a video. Thank you so much for watching my October wrap up. If you have read any of these books, please do let me know in the comments down below, and also well done you for getting to the end of this very long wrap up. Oh, my dog's gone.